Hi everyone. If you're like me, and Lord help you if you are, or if you're like a lot of psychology students, you probably weren't looking forward to this statistics class very much. Few psychology students do. You're not alone. Perhaps you even have a near phobia of the topic or math in general. Well, I want to try to help reassure you a little bit here. I want to try to get some of the fear of the math out of the way. The truth is, there is some math and statistics, but really it's not that advanced or difficult. In a second, I'll tell you a little bit more about um, what probably trips you up and how you can go around about fixing it and avoiding the problems that you probably have with math. But first, let me tell you a little quick story that, well, I hope it will reassure you and not make you think less than you already think of me. But when I was deciding to go to college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to major in. I had no clue. My friends were going to major in business. My dad, in particular, was breathing down my neck, wanting to know what I was going to do with my life and what I was going to study. And so I decided to be a business major without knowing anything about it. To this day, I'm not even quite sure what people do in all these tall buildings that are around me here in downtown Honolulu, what they do in the business world. I'm not really sure. Well, it wasn't the right major for me. And one of the things that tripped me up was the math. I had to take, I was supposed to take a whole bunch of math classes, up including calculus and things like that. And so I had such a bad math background in high school and whatnot, and such a fear of math myself, that I started out by taking a class called Math 101. It wasn't the very bottom of the pile, Math 100 was. I don't remember what the exact title of the course was, but it was Math 101. You can imagine it wasn't very challenging or upper level. Well, I decided the first day of class, the moment the professor walked in, that I was going to probably fail the class. I wasn't that smart. I looked at the professor. He looked like a jerk. Turns out he wound up being one. And I decided I'm not going to do well in this class, and I proceeded to, as a self-fulfilling prophecy, to make that happen. I'll tell you the truth, I flunked the class. It was a two-part class, and by the midterm, I had flunked the first half. Being the idiot that I am, I didn't think that I was allowed to continue because the second half, Math 102, had as a prerequisite success in Math 101. So I just stopped going. And at the end of the semester, when I got my report card, I had an F for both parts of the class. To this day, I never did anything about it. I never got the F removed, and so I've got that 4 credits of F on my transcript to this day. All right. Shortly after that, I went back and I took the Math 100 class, and I'm happy and proud to say that I got an A in that class. So all hope is not lost. Well, I was dreading taking all of that math and all the way up to calculus. And in the meanwhile, I decided business wasn't for me, so I changed my major to psychology. And one of the things that sealed the deal for me when I looked up the requirements for psychology was the math requirement. All I had to have was at least Math 100. I was done. No more math for me. So I'm ashamed to admit that that was the furthest along I went in my mathematics education in college. So, a year or two later, I was just like you, taking an Introduction to Statistics and Psychology course. Required class just like it is for you. Well, I'm embarrassed to say that I got probably a gentleman's C in that class. I don't remember much of anything I might have learned in that class. Granted, it was a long, long time ago, but it's safe to say that I did not know statistics when I walked out of that class. It didn't stop me from being a psychology major, and I graduated, decided at some point to go on to graduate school, and the first thing just about any psych grad program has you do is a math statistics course. So I wound up my very first semester in grad school taking a class that, well, is a lot like this class. And I think I got a B in it, which in grad school is kind of like getting a C sometimes, all right? So truth be told, I walked out of that first graduate course in statistics not really knowing stats yet. Are you feeling good about your professor yet? Let me finish. All right, well, I had to take a few other statistics courses, and I wound up taking 4 altogether in graduate school, the equivalent of 2 years of statistics. And I'm proud and happy to say that at some point the light came on. I started to understand it. And as I was telling you in another video at the beginning of the course, I was giving you tips about studying together and teaching. I told you then that that's one of the places where I found out how best to know something is to teach it. And so sadly for those first few semesters of students of mine, they had to help me learn how to teach statistics. So my point in telling you all this is not to make you think, oh boy, oh great, I have a math idiot professor teaching me a statistics class. Well, I can't argue with that point very much, but I want to swing it around in this direction and tell you that if you are one of these people who, like me, was fearful of math, who was downright afraid of it and think that they're awful at it, and maybe are awful at it, let me try to get you to take some comfort in the fact that you have a professor that knows what that struggle is like, who's been there himself. We've all had professors in topics that were just sheer brilliant. So brilliant, in fact, that they probably couldn't you found that they couldn't explain things very well. They couldn't understand how someone could possibly not understand this complicated topic that they've gotten a degree in. I like to think that that's not me. I like to think that one of my strengths is that I can teach this topic to those people that were like me that just didn't get math. Okay? So, I hope that was a little bit reassuring. Maybe I said too much. So, still, let's get this math fear out of the way. Now, some of you maybe already know this sentence I have at the bottom of the screen here. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. That's a mnemonic to help us remember the order of operations in mathematics. If you're like me, what screwed me up in math back in the day was generally not knowing the order in which to do things. I'd be looking at a formula and I didn't understand this principle yet. And math doesn't always work like how we read as Western readers from left to right. That doesn't work when you're looking at a formula. In general, you work formulas from the inside out. That's the most basic kind of mnemonic I can tell you, is work a formula when you see it from the inside out. Okay? But even better still, adhere to this order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. What in the world does that mean if you're not familiar with it? Okay, a mnemonic is a silly sentence designed to help you remember something a little bit longer. All right, so please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. All right, so first we do things that are in parentheses. You do that stuff first. Now, that tricks you up sometimes because sometimes you have to imagine parentheses where they are none. All right, I'll come back to that. After doing things in those parentheses, whether they're there or whether you had to envision them, we go on to do exponents. These are numbers like numbers that are squared or cubed. Good news is, in this class, in statistics, the only exponent we're ever going to see is squaring numbers. So we will be squaring things. All right? Next, we do multiplication. When we do multiplication in this class and in stats courses in general, we use slightly different notation than you might be used to in some math classes. We don't use the multiplication symbol, the X. X, as you're going to see, is reserved for a few other confusing things. So we won't say 3x4 to say 3 times 4. We'll generally put one or both of those numbers in parentheses. So this number times that number. Okay? All right. We go on to do division next, and that will usually be symbolized as a fraction. 3 divided by 4. Now, we'll never leave a fraction alone as a final answer. Our answer will never be 3/4 or a fraction like that. A fraction is just begging to be divided, all right? So we will carry that out and do 3 divided by 4 equals 0.75. That would be the correct final answer to that, never 3/4. Okay? Next to last, we will do addition, and we have a symbol. We're going to learn notation later, but here's your first time perhaps seeing it. We're going to use this Greek symbol sigma, capital letter sigma, and that is our cue to add whatever is following it. So add whatever is right next to the sigma sign. Lastly, we'll do subtraction. Okay? Now, let's wrap this up by looking at this little formula here. And if you've taken a stats class before, brownie points if you can tell me what that's a formula for. But we're not going to cover that now here. All right, so there we're seeing several of the things that we looked at up here above. All right, now if we were going to follow this order of operations, is there anything in parentheses? No, nothing to do in parentheses. Anything, any exponents? Well, no, there's no exponents. Don't need to do those. Multiplication. Nope, nothing to multiply. Not much going on here. Division. Aha, there's division. Okay, now you might be tempted therefore to do some division first. We have to take this top sigma x divided by n minus 1. Well, we don't yet have a value for sigma x, so we can't very well go and divide yet. All right, so addition. Well, there's addition, the sigma sign, all right? So now it's time to add. Add up all of the little x's, all right? We'll learn later what little x means. It's a deviation score. Add the deviations together. And then finally we would do subtraction. So if we were following this sentence to the letter, we might be tempted to add up all those little x's, divide by n, and then lastly subtract by 1. Well, that wouldn't be the right answer. So what did we have to do to solve this dilemma? We had to imagine parentheses where there were none. All right, so you might imagine that there was parentheses surrounding the top, the sigma little x, okay? And and we could do that component first. Then you needed to imagine that there was parentheses around n minus 1 and get that value before you could go on and divide. Okay, so maybe you want to jot this down if you stumble with math a little bit, and keep that handy as we start to do some formulas. We'll walk through them, and hopefully you'll see how, you won't need to turn to this, but just in case, it's nice to have. All right, so trust me on this. That's probably what's going to stumble people up is the order of operations. The other thing that will trick some students up is not learning what some of the notation is that we're going to be using. Now, those are going to be sort of like letters of the alphabet. You can't really understand words and sentences if you don't yet know the letters of the language. So when we get to that point, I will be reminding you, know these symbols. I'm going to be reintroducing things like sigma and little x and what n is and a few others. Okay? If you don't remember those, if you don't take the time to learn those, then that will screw you up as well. Okay? But that's not really mathematics. Now, lastly, the final thing I want to say about this not being a math class is this. The most complicated mathematics that you're going to see in this class is things like this. It won't ever be quite this simple, but what does that mean? The square root of 9. So square root, in my opinion, is probably the most complicated math that we do in this statistics course. Okay? Now, once upon a time, you and I probably learned how to do square roots, perhaps by hand. If I did, I've long since forgotten. No idea how I did, how to do a square root by hand. How do I solve that? Now, you probably already knew the answer to that. Square root of 9. Oh, that's 3. Okay, that one was a nice, simple example. All right? Well, what if you came across something like this? What's the square root of 27.13. Quick, quick. All right, well, how do we solve this? You and I will solve this with one of these. So this, by the way, is about as much calculator as you really need for this class. I forgot to mention that earlier. You don't need to go buy yourself any kind of sophisticated calculator. If you learned how to use one of those Texas Instrument jobs the size of an old-fashioned cell phone, not more power to you. Knock yourself out. You're more than welcome to use it. I don't know how to use them. I won't be showing you how to use those. This is the one that I have right here on my desk. And it does just about everything I need to do because it's got a square root button on it. Okay, I hardly ever see a calculator anymore without a square root button. So don't buy one that doesn't have a square root button. Sometimes I miss having a square button on here. Okay, I don't have a x squared button on here. And if you don't either, you just multiply a number by itself to square it. So maybe you'll get a slightly better calculator than this, but you'll be just fine using one like this. All right. If you happen to be watching this and you're taking a class of mine that is in person, an in-person class where we take exams in person, then I'm going to forbid you from using your cell phone as a calculator for perhaps obvious reasons. Okay. So you guys out there in online world, knock yourselves out and use your phones as calculators all you want. But in person, for obvious reasons, I can't let you use a smartphone in class during an exam. Okay? So, I promise you the mathematics of this course isn't going to be difficult. I can't promise you that the logic and some of the concepts won't make this course difficult. I can't promise you that your disinterest in statistics won't stumble you up, all right? Let's be frank. We tend to do better in the classes that we are very interested in and excited about, and I don't know how excited or interested you are personally in statistics and then the sister course, research methods. Traditionally, students don't look at these as their two favorite. You probably didn't look at your curriculum for a psych major and go, oh, stats and research methods, I can't wait to get in those classes. If you are one of those nerds, well, welcome. Here we are. All right, for the rest of us, all I can do is suggest that you work, and you might have to work, on the attitude. Work on the attitude. Don't let yourself hate it. Don't leave it all until exam time, because that adds up and makes you hate a class, especially one that you weren't enjoying. Okay, so don't worry about the math. Do worry a little bit about the new terms, the logic, this philosophy. It's a different way of doing things and approaching things, and that's a little bit different. But don't fear the math. I promise you, from someone that has been there and still kind of fears math. If I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for your attention. See you next time.